11, please. Okay. So now we are going to start with the first panel of the day. The agenda for the panel, will be investment in research and development. And I would like to introduce first the moderators of this panel, Ms. Asha Sampath and Mr. Eswaran R. will be moderating today's discussion on investment in R&D. May I request Ms. Asha and Mr. Eswaran to take their seats. Asha ma'am, Eswaran sir, kindly take your seats. Can we have a round of applause? Asha and Eswaran are from the Bespoke Show, founded by Sid Baliga and Asha Sampath. And the Bespoke Show is a platform for candid discussions on all kinds of topics of interest, including conventional and non-conventional sectors, media, art, entertainment, and even international affairs. Now, I would like to introduce our panelists. The first panelist of the day is Dr. Ajit Rangnekar. Can we have a round of applause? He's the Director General for Research and Innovation Circle in IIT of Research and Innovation Circle of Hyderabad. He is also the former Dean of Indian School of Business, and he's been a member of many global committees and advises boards of foundations and social ventures. Our second panelist, Mr. Devanand Kolothodi. Can we have a round of applause? He's the CEO of Aster Prime Hospital. Aster Prime Hospital at Amirpet is a subsidiary of Aster DM Health Group. Headquartered in Dubai, the Aster DM Healthcare Network is currently one of the largest and fastest growing conglomerates in the Middle East and North Africa region. Our third panelist is Dr. Srinivasa Rao, CEO, Apollo MedSkills. He's a physician providing clinical thought, leadership, and multi-expertise for making optimum use of information and communication technology in medicine and healthcare. He has over a decade of experience in medical education and healthcare scaling, and he's leading one of the largest healthcare scaling and e-learning companies in Asia. Our fourth and final panelist of the panel is Dr. Venkatraman Gedra. Please have a round of applause. He's the CEO and principal scientist and co-founder at Nanospan Incorporation. He's an experienced principal scientist with a demonstrated history of working in nanotechnology-based industry. He's skilled in nanotechnology, carbon nanotubes, graphene, polymer nanocomposites, thin films, material science, and energy storage devices. I welcome all the panelists and the moderators, and I will now hand over the stage to Asha and Eswaran to lead the panel discussion. Thank you very much.
In today's panel discussion, we have a diverse team of experts who are going to throw light on various aspects of research and development about what kind of budget allocations are available for R&D in India, to what extent the R&D work is actually getting monetized, and what trends can we see going forward given the rapid technology advancements that's happening. So if I may start with Ajit. When we talk of R&D, we actually have two segments. One is the private segment and the private spend segment, and the other is the public spend segment. As per statistics released by DST, I think India is amongst the top countries where a big percentage of almost 62% of R&D spend comes from the public sector. So when we say public sector, I think mainly we are talking of spaces like energy and defense, where either the investments are too huge for private sectors to participate, or the gestation periods are very long, or three, there could be areas of national security, and so more prerogative of the public sector. Do you see a shift happening in the coming years in terms of more and more private participation, or in terms of a public-private partnership that's going to take shape?
So I think it's different in each sector to some extent, right? So if I take the four, and you practically mentioned most of them as national priority sector: food and agriculture, health, defense and aerospace, and education, if I can take those four. So in each one of them, the picture is very, very different. So if we start with food and agriculture, almost all the research happens in the public space. There is very, very little happening. However, what's happening is a lot of people are coming in. By the way, that's true of all these four, is it? That people are coming from the what used to be old days called IT as digital technology sector. And they are, for the most part, these are people with a solution looking for a problem to solve. So I know AI, ML. What can I do in health, or what can I do in? So the research is not really happening in the industry in food and agriculture. And God knows we need. Part of the reason, of course, is that the government's reluctance to do anything on GM, which is where a lot of the whole. So that's in health. There is a lot of really high quality work happening in institutions. Most of them are government research institutions. There is an enormous amount of research support that is given by DST and DBT. And we often criticize and complain about governments, but the work that is being done in sciences by the government is truly phenomenal. The problem is taking a product, once there is a proof of concept, taking it from proof of concept to commercialization is a long and arduous problem. And for the most part, the Indian health industry, and by that I mean more the pharma rather than the hospitals, and I'll come to the hospital. For the most part, the Indian health industry has shown no interest. They're only interested in the good old, this thing of looking for products going out of patent, and now increasingly for biosimilars. So the research that is happening in pharma sector is predominantly biosimilar based. There is very, very little, practically no new thing. There is practically nothing in genetics. So that is a worrying sign where R&D is concerned. And part of that problem is that the time required to take it up the technology transfer scale is very long and very expensive. Then if it comes to defense and aerospace, again the governments and DRDO is doing it, but there are a number of national research institutions, and you come from ARCI, and we increasingly are beginning to see some young people doing really good work in material sciences, etc. Problem is, nobody talks about it. Also, Tatas, Mahindras, Reliance, and big companies are getting into this space. And these are people who, by nature, are somewhat more willing to try new things. So, surprisingly, aerospace and defense is one area where we see a lot of interest in this thing. Education. I actually think that none of the children of this group of people will ever come to an institution like this. I think education is going to be completely disrupted, completely and totally. And what you saw a short while ago is, I think, just the first bit. But with 5G coming and AR, VR, education as we know it is going to be completely destroyed. Actually going to be democratized. So, education institutions have students, they have faculty, and they have infrastructure. All of that is going to go away. And anyone sitting anywhere will get the best education in the world. And there is no research happening in any of our education institutions on any of those. So we have this funny mixed bag across. I have a lot of hope from many startups, but funding is a big problem. And, the kind of capabilities that are required. So there are biochemists, but they don't understand manufacturing, they don't understand distribution, they don't understand regulatory, they don't understand, how to deal with clinicians. So I think many of those things have to be created, which is what some of us are trying to do, is to create those ecosystems in each space. I'll stop here.
Yeah, hi all. Hi. This point I understand, like a lot of research is happening at the same time. It is not only happening in the public sector, like rightly you said, in other areas happening in the private sector also. Like you said about drugs and even in like the education system also some changes are coming. Now the same take is on Dr. Rao because you are from pharma. So sorry, healthcare. Healthcare. So like when we talk about the research done by in the year 1996 with respect to GDP share of the entire India on the research and development, now and then it is same.
Absolutely.
We are only saying that is increasing. GDP percentage as per the data it is 0.63% in the year 1996, and recently 3 years before they taken again it is 0.63. Surprisingly there is no change. So that is one area, right? Second is how far we feel that the kind of research we are doing, is it actually a research or on an existing product we are just doing certain changes. Any like disruption is happening, I don't think so it's a discovery like somebody discovered a bulb. It is existing product is there, some small changes we are doing. So what is your take on that?
Absolutely. I think the stagnation of the research funding is definitely an alarming thing. But I think a lot of good innovations happened in silos, in healthcare particularly. Where are the innovations happening? I think innovations are happening basically in 3 areas. One is in easing the consumer service. For example, there's no new product development, as Professor Rangnekar has also just mentioned. I think there's very little focus on new product development because of the lack of support systems. But in terms of consumer ease, few healthcare innovations, I would say. One of them is actually in terms of consumer ease. The average length of stay of a patient in a hospital has significantly reduced after advent of these home healthcare companies in India now, Porteous, Nightingales, Apollo Home Care. So the ALOS, the average length of stay, which is the number of days the patient stays, has significantly reduced. For example, a knee replacement patient who had stayed in the hospital for 7 days earlier now gets discharged in 72 hours, 3 days, because of the support systems. This is an innovation, but has there been any research study surrounding this? How much is the reduction in the kind of the average waiting times in a hospital because of innovations of Practo, booking an online appointment? There have been innovations, but the research studies surrounding those innovations are almost nil. I must say, neither the industry is doing that, nor the government intends to do that. Possibly, at least at this moment, there are no researches happening around these innovations. The second area is, I think, in the business process automation, in technology, as I mentioned, Practo, there are innovations happening, but there are no new drug research developments happening, except, I think, Lupin, which allocates about 10% of its budget on new product development. Most of the pharma companies originating from India have very less R&D budgets. Then in terms of new device development, a lot of new innovations are happening in new device development also, but because of lack of support systems. Just before this, Professor Rangnekar was mentioning about few devices, how hospitals' ecosystem should support. Because these innovations are happening in, say, an young engineer is building a low-cost ventilator. Where does he test? He has to test in a government hospital. Do we have regulations which are governing these research innovations? No. Today, these are some of the challenges. So, I think there is a need of increasing that budgets around doing research around the existing innovations that have happened, and also patenting those innovations in the right way. I think the support systems have to improve and the budgets have to improve for that.
So if I can just add, I think there's a lot of stuff happening in taking at least diagnostics to the poorest of poor. So in terms of outreach, and predominantly using digital technology and a variant on telemedicine, there is a lot happening. And I would argue that maybe as a society for us, being able to reach the poorest of poor in the farthest district faster is more important than developing a new molecule. So there is a completely separate philosophical argument still awaiting. I'll stop there.
Yeah, that sounds like an interesting point, but are there any legal restrictions on telemedicines?
Yes, so right now there is, and I think, but even if the, the person who is, see, district level or sub-district level health centers, even if they can be equipped, and even if they can give things like stuff for, a cold or a cough or a viral, that itself is going to be a first step. And at some stage, the government will have to face up to this, that at least in rural sector where there is no doctor available within 50 kilometers or something, you will have to, or they will have to qualify a certain number of people with the help of telemedicine as being good enough to be doctors for. Some of that is still
Yeah, that's
not
another
done. and
topic, probably.
Yeah, can I just add one
Please
point
do.
here? Like two things I want to say here. One is, as a country, India, what India actually requires is more of ease, accessibility, economy. So that is why I think most of the pharmaceutical companies are reinventing their own product to reach the mass and probably add into that and to make it more popular. That is one. Second thing about the telemedicine, it's not about the restrictive part of it. It is about the psychological part of it. We've been trying, I think Apollo has been trying, Astra as a group, we have been trying telemedicine. But the problem is that many times patients, unless until they see a doctor in person, that causes, even Professor was saying the same thing, even though the technological advancement has come in, patients are still not happy, unless until they see a doctor touching them, There's a thing called personal touch.
Yeah.
So that's still there, we have to go a long way to,
They call it the placebo
the
effect.
mental blockage, yes.
The placebo effect on patients.
Just to add on the legalities, actually November 2019, the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare has released the National Digital Health Blueprint. Okay, so this is already there in the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare website for review, final review. I think there is something happening in that area. Not just telehealth, but mobile health, a lot of mobile applications that are coming up. Now I think this regulatory will boost the number of innovations in this particular area.
The reason I asked about the legality was from a personal experience, actually. I was trying to get a recommendation on a BP medicine for a close relative, and the home care association that normally treats my relative said, there's a recent Supreme Court ruling that we are not allowed to give any prescriptions on the phone. So that's how the concerns arouse.
We do manage to create our own syntax.
Right. We were talking about the patents. We were mentioning about the process, IP filing process. So one of the key indicators, I would like to take this question to Dr. Venkat. One of the key indicators of R&D is the number of patents filed, right? I'm sorry, can you switch off? I think Dr. Satish. I'm sorry, so the other panelists for the next section. So one of the key parameters for R&D progress is the number of patents filed. And looking at the statistics, I think the number of patents filed between 2007 and 2018 has actually doubled in India. But if we look at it as a percentage of the number of patents that are live in case of USA, China, and other countries, I think ours is a very minuscule percentage. So how do you decode that? Is that a indicator of lack of progress, or is that proportionate to the demographic situations in the two countries and the level of economic development that's happening? That was my first question. And the second question related to the same point is, are a lot of those patents relating more to computer technology and electronics and less to more practical areas such as bioenergy or wastewater management? Do you see a shortfall in the kind of research that's happening from both the parameters?
Well, let me take the two questions are interconnected, right?
Right.
So patent generation, if you generate a patent, you need to have a more research. It involves two things: the quality and the international standards. You maintain that. If you are into public sector, the funding again, the hanging knife always for entrepreneur like young and startups is a very It is like every day in our head. So every day we need to accountable in that. So I was into public sector as my research career, started that one. And almost 10 years I was there. And now I am starting this game with private sector money related R&D, funding related R&D, okay? So for this question, private sector and the company, if you want to make develop R&D based companies, and that too in advanced areas, okay? So the patent is the parameter, first one. Again, the second interrelated thing is your valuation of your company is related to your patent. How many patents? The second question, US and this one. Again, the valuation is US is good. So geometrical also, the quality relates based on geometry. If it is US patent, it is more valid. And also you are more safe. For example, recently, last 2 weeks back, couple of weeks back, we got a US patent. We applied US as parallelly India also, okay? So we are more concentrated on US, though I am in India, okay? So it's related to funding again. The funding driven and the revenue generate your company, these things are always evolving along with your technology.
So funding is one of the important stumbling blocks in progress.
So I think the research quality from national institutes like IITs, you named it. We are very good in that one, but the driven force, when you are into PhD and your coursework, it is publication driven, okay? Right. If you are a professor and you are in this side, right. So how many numbers is related to your promotions? Right. Let me honest in that, right. Okay? If you are into scientific like ARSA and any kind of another side, national institutes, their driven force is to make projects like DST, the firm, how many projects they want and which area they want. These things only the force to promote your thing, but it's really like sectors like us. Right. But if it's app development, it's okay. The overheads are good. If you have small room, if you have 4G, 5G, this is different ball game. But if you're coming towards aerospace, defense, material science, what? Because I am live example of that. So it's required more joining hands. That's why sir mentioned the ecosystem. Not only simple incubation center with all facility. All facility incubation centers I have seen. T-Hub, T-Vaxa named it. Very good in that communicating people and arranging meetings. Up to that it is good. On paper it is good also. But things for us, for me, let me take my example. If I am working in nanomaterial segment, I know this material nano, but how can I prove that one? If it is a IIT, they have next year room, they have a scanning electron microscopy, they can do it and they prove that one. As a private entity, the small company like startup, and if you want to prove that one, ultimately our target is market. Market requires only product, quality product, right? So for me, take this example. So getting that scanning electron microscopy testing, that's a service. So on paper, it is available all IITs, all national laboratories, and India has plenty of. But a company wants to utilize that one, there are number of hierarchies. So again, as I mentioned, the knife is money and funding, but it is related to your timelines. If I promise next week is my product delivery, that means next week for me. The same thing if I give that sample to test whether it is nano or not, for simple example. For that guy says that maybe it takes 1 week. So based on that 1 week, I made all the thing. But simply because of some technical issue, if they skip that one, because since we can't afford that much of equipment, so we need to depend outside. So that's the way the ecosystem for us, for companies like us, is more essential. So if that guy skips, everything collapsed.
Yeah, here, like Dr. Venkata, I'll really agree with you because in academia, especially, there is either you publish or perish. Because your entire lifespan or your entire the career in academic is based upon how many, I think, kids are understanding.
Yeah.
You have to publish the papers. There is no other go, right? But here I'll have one more because it's really getting interesting. I have some data. I'll just read it to you. If you talk about our so-called very big institutes, like you said, IIT sitting inside, You have ISC, you have TIFR, you have ISERS, you have NISERS. Many research institutes. You name one, we have research institute. Some data that is showing, when we talk about our highly cited research, we call it HCR, right? Only 10 Indians are figured all over the world. You are saying that in IIT, you want to prove that it is nano, you have a lab, you go there, prove it, come back. I am talking data. Out of total, there are, 6,217 HCRs are being filed. Kids, you can listen. 6,217 HCRs have been filed all over the world. And out of that, only 10 are Indians. And there were total 60 different subjects. 2 are Indians. Only 2 are Indians. So where are we heading? Where are we heading? And you can really take part, and definitely I want Ajit sir to tell his views also in this. That where are we heading?
To be honest, I don't know this data, so it's, I'm just, hypothesizing based on. I think the level of work being done in most Indian research institutions, by and large, tends to be India focused and not world standard focused. Because from 50s, this Swavalamban and the whole this, it's India on its own, has had a mindset. I'm not saying it's wrong, but I'm saying therefore a lot of it is unlikely to fit into these kind of categories. Because most of these standards are set by the West. So if you had a different one which has an impact metric, for example, which says how many lives did it touch, maybe that this thing could be different. Because some research being done on a rice grain which has a low glycemic index could impact the health of maybe 500 million Indians who are now suffering from. So I think we have to be a little careful about what is. I think only in the last 4 or 5 years has the government research machinery been shaken up. And apparently I was told this, that the Prime Minister asked them, either tell me the lives you have impacted or tell me how many global patents you have filed. I don't want to know anything else. Now, you cannot, research institutions are like vast big ships. You cannot just change them because the Prime Minister wants to change it. Right? So we are seeing some change. We are beginning to see, and the CSIR has actually done, again, we underestimate the good stuff being done in the government. CSIR has now decreed that 40% of your cost has to be made from your own revenue. So you better start selling your know-how. That's number one. Number two, 15% of that goes to the principal scientist. And another 10% goes to her team. So now there is a personal incentive, which by the way is part of the reason why you're suddenly seeing that increase in the number of patents, etc. Because all of a sudden, if that PM calls me again, I better have something to show. The second thing is many more Indian education institutions and private education institutions have got into this global ranking game. And one of the criteria in global ranking game is patents. And therefore you see a whole lot of Indian education institutions filing patents left, right and center. I would love to see what is the value of those patents. We are great in gaming a system. The moment we create any performance criteria, and I'm sure all of us are equally good at it, right? You create that attendance has a certain percentage, we'll make sure we attend. If you want sports has a certain, we'll all do it, right? So we are very good at it. So I would be a little skeptical about all these numbers. I think it is true that we are really not doing the kind of world-class research.
Sir, here one more is there. You rightly touched that point. If you see in the world citation for like the filing of the new patents from Indian side, it is huge. It is 5% of the total world. But it is 5% of total world paper. Actual registered citations are only 3%, that means there's a 40% drop. So you are rightly said that you want to see the quality. This is the quality where like out of the every 100 papers we are filing, 40 are being getting rejected and only remaining 60 are being taken in. Really, really, really applaud kids. This is what the interior, applaud kids. This is what the interior we talk about, because he was doubtful and the data says that.
So I just want to add a point
Please.
here. So just to expand the statistics. So there are 51,000 universities and institutions in India now registered, right? So, but the patents are low. I think on the ground level, even at a graduate professional education, I did my medicine from here, Usmania Medical College. So the challenge is the research is not taught in medicine. Research is not taught in engineering. Research, there are not many teachers, I don't know, not many teachers who can teach statistics authoritatively, which forms the basis for research. So I think how to do research, I think that whole basics have to be established now across the university systems in order to publish high quality or highly cited research papers. I think at a grassroots level, I think there's a lot of work to be done.
So do you think more international exchange programs by the Indian universities could help get us there?
Yes, I mean, the reason I'm laughing is that 5 years ago when the two states were split and Chandrababu, I went to just congratulate him and he says, you helped me create another ISB. And I told him, ISB is a 20-year-old story. We shouldn't be doing it. We should be creating joint research institution in 5 areas which will do high quality collaborative research, which will, help us. Unfortunately, nothing happened about it. But I'll also give you a counter view. Look at this. When I joined IIT, there were 4 or 5 IITs, right? Now there are, I don't know how many IITs. But a new IIT is today doing extremely well. So the democratization of education, so our focus has been on teaching. For donkey's years, IITs and even IIMs, IITs used to have 300 to 400 intake, IIMs used to have between 120 and 180. And for donkey's years, we continued like that. Then we put in the OBC category, we increased the numbers and so on. There has not been any reduction in quality. But the emphasis has emphatically moved to teaching. And if you want to do research, in ISB, our top faculty used to teach between 80 and 100 hours a year. That's it. And ideally all in one semester of 5 weeks or 6 weeks. And then for the remaining 40 odd weeks, they are free to do research. That requires a lot of time, money, and move away from teaching. As a nation, what should our priority be? Maybe our priority, which is why I was saying that maybe create, and this is where our whole, socialistic mindset goes against it. I think a few IITs, I think a few research institutions should be kept exclusive, and only doctoral and postdoctoral research institutions to do the best of collaborative research with the best of institutions and produce only a handful of really. Quality is what matters in high quality research, not thousands of PhDs. Today we are producing thousands of PhDs, and I think that model is wrong.
Just to add what Professor has just said, 2 statistics. One, when this topic was given to, as personally I did some research, the point probably this particular point was supposed to raise. So 2 statistics. One is that, the number of PhDs are what you just mentioned. The new initiative of the government, which to launch the IISER, Indian Institute of Science Education Research, has produced about 600 graduates now. Out of that, 60% of them have got into international universities to do their PhD. So country, I think, has taken this step to, like what Professor has said. So that is one thing. Second thing is that out of the 10 Indians that you have mentioned, internationally, IITs can be proud of, because, 4 are actually from IITs. So, out of the 10 in world, cited researchers, the top profile researchers, 4 are from IITs. 2 are actually faculties in IITs now, IIT Chennai and IIT, I think, Kanpur. 2 are from alumni of IIT Roorkee. So, there are people who are really focused on research even after their academics, along with their academics, but that orientation of research along with the UG or PG studies is still not there. So probably that is something which as a country we have to really focus.
Maybe we'll come back to that point, but while you're on the mic, I would like to ask you the next question. Lot of investments in R&D is happening in computer technology, like cloud computing, data science, and artificial intelligence. To what extent is it actually impacting research in healthcare? Is it helping to improve early diagnosis and improve patient outcomes, or is it helping reduce mortality rates, or is it helping to provide more effective and affordable drugs? Is it anyway impacting at all, or what's your take?
There are basically 2 versions. One, you asked about production of drugs or the development of new drugs, which is a totally different thing. Basically, when you look at the pharma, the investment, when you see the pharma industry, the investment of R&D has been low, even though the Indian pharma is investing more. Because of the fact that the time period to develop a new drug is huge, and the patent period, as I understand, is probably about 20 years after they generate the patent. So, and basically the problem that Professor also mentioned in one of the point, where in India, if you generate a drug, will that be accepted internationally? Many people may not accept it unless until it's a US FDA approved drug. So many Indian companies also have a tendency to develop the drug, even the drug will be developed in the US. That is one. Second thing, on the first question that you asked on the involvement of technology into improvement of healthcare, yes, definitely there have been a lot of such initiatives has been coming. As as a proponent of technology in the healthcare space, we look out for a lot of such initiatives every time. So I was just sharing something when we were sitting there. About 2 weeks back, the team came to my hospital. There is one challenge that we usually face where the doctors, when they see the patient, they want to spend more time with the patient rather than typing on a computer, because the electronic medical record is something which everybody specifies now, because data is going to be a major game changer. But then many times doctors complain that I'm spending more time on my computer. Even patients think that doctor is doing some email, personal business, and they are not giving that much time to me. So they always say that always writing prescription, I can at least have that eye contact, I can speak to him, right? But then in front of the computer, I am fully into that. So a company had actually come to us with a device where the doctor could actually write. It automatically captures his, the movements, finger movements. It will capture, automatically convert as an electronic record, integrated with the HIS. But the conclusion there was what, again, the doctor has to write in a paper. I would have been very happy if that paper also would have been removed. Everybody is going towards that paperless initiative now. So if they would have come out with a device where they could write in a device, device captures directly. But every time the doctor writes, he has to again write in a paper. So technology, lot of things, such things are coming up. But somehow out of that, if you ask me, say 50% of them are directly impacting life of patients, especially remote monitoring of critical care results, when you look at it, or reduction in hospitalization, as doctor just mentioned before. And also on the medical, you also asked about oral prescriptions over phone. Why it is not allowed is that there are a lot of medication errors that's happening. There is an administration error, while the doctor says spelling errors. There may be a lot of perception errors also, which can harm the patient. So that's why it has been specifically blocked by the regulatory authorities not to have. So, but then always the doctor can send you a WhatsApp. Now there are a lot of other things which has come in. You could have asked for that, or an email would have done. So when you look at it, there are portable ventilators now which you can use at home. Now there are portable dialysis units which you can use at home. So a lot of things have been developed. Before coming to Hyderabad, I was in a place called Wayanad. We have a medical college there. I was heading the project there. Wayanad is a place which is a rural area, and you won't believe that there is not a single super specialist in the entire district. So, and most of 18% of the population is tribals. So, accessibility was an issue, affordability is an issue, reach of the healthcare is an issue, lot of issues were there. We have tried everything there, like, you know, the telemedicine we have tried all these things. So, this technology has, in a way, has helped a lot, you know, in reaching the places where it was not at all accessible otherwise. So, there is definitely, yes, it has helped.
The only reason I mentioned about the affordable and effective drugs owing from the technology is because of the huge amount of data that's available today. It probably is going to make it easier to zero in on more effective medicines based on statistics and past.
So for us to do that, well, we have to start.
Right.
Because there is no data today. It's all manual.
Okay.
Today, every single thing, especially in government hospitals, is entirely manual. Okay, the other thing is, in a vast majority of cases in one particular big hospital, we realize that they write what the patient is complaining about and they write what medicines they prescribe. They don't put in their diagnosis. So even a lot of that is pretty damn useless for conversion of data. But you're right, we should be in an ideal place to develop, you know, matrix which at least says in 80% of the cases, this looks like what it is. And here is a simple medicine. So we are ripe for telemedicine and we should be aggressively going in that direction.
But a lot of the private hospitals are generating huge amount of data already, right? In fact, there's a huge data bank.
And they want to monetize it, unfortunately, sadly.
Yes.
Like here, one thing I'll come so that we can add to that, so that things become quite interesting. Again, taking cue from your point when you say that the drugs that has been made by India, is there anybody to approve or will the government approve? Whereas it's been approved by FDA, it will be approved very fast. Here I talk about when long back I studied one book by the name of Bottle of Lies, and it is written by Catherine Eban. So it talks about the generic drugs that has been approved by USA, by FDA. And when like the Catherine was an investigating journalist, and when she found that from where the drugs are coming, the majorly generic drugs are coming from China and India. When she came to India and see how the drugs have been made and to China, so especially in China, a lot of nexus were there. And she has written a lot of things about how the generics been used and the patients are actually complaining about the side effect. And doctors were least bothered. They said that it may be happening because with the original drug manufacturer, that means so those kind of things are also be seen. So when you talk about research and development and taking it to the general public, are we using them as rats?
No, I think, you know, we should not use sensationalist media reporters as data. I don't think that is data. You know, FDA is, and if you talk to the Indian pharma industry, and Indian pharma industry has got a lot of good, honest, well-meaning people doing some serious work to make profits, but they are doing good. And I think Dr. Ranji Reddy from this city was the pioneer who made medicine affordable, good quality medicine affordable in this country. So I think it's unfair to brush all of them as if, I think there is a lot of fake goods which are happening, which I don't think come under FDA anyway. And whether you have FDA, whether you have Indian drugs, whether you have somebody's producing fakes, there is producing fakes, and that's the end of it. You can't do much about it. But the Indian pharma industry is today producing really high quality drugs simply because of the intense FDA scrutiny. And there is a pure financial, if you read in the newspaper that FDA raised something, your share price drops by 3% or 4%. So there is a strong financial incentive for them to not do. I know that they are investing a lot of money in training, because again, the Indian mindset is not to be that proper in documentation, not worry. I mean, even, I think this hall will not meet FDA certification for safety. I promise you that. Okay. So I think, you know, there is a lot that is happening, but the fundamental issue is Today, the Western medicine is slowly coming and accepting that, oh, you know, the way we were producing medicines was not wrong. The way in which FDA approves, most of which is based on white Anglo-Saxon male clientele, and then gives those same medicines all across the world without any concern for the genetic diversity, is the root cause. Don't blame the genetic for it. The genetic is doing exactly what the original drug did. So I don't think one should blame the genetic. Genetic has actually helped the US industry because the cost of healthcare in the US is under control simply because of, by the way, Israel is another big country which produced it.
So how much of these generic drugs actually align with the branded ones?
So if it is genetic and if it's generic and it is approved, it has to meet all those requirements, right? And it must show exactly the same treatment.
Okay. So there's a fair argument in favor of the progress that's actually being made towards more of generic drugs at more affordable prices?
It is, because certainly we have got benefited as a country a lot. And you know, again, see, we talk in idealism. The two funny and crazy things that this country did, three. One is it banned IBM in 1977. Net result is we were stuck with whatever it was, which then gave rise to Y2K and which gave rise to India's IT. India's IT technology came because we banned IBM way back in 77. A completely wrong thing, but we did it. We also banned Coca-Cola and in the process created Thumbs Up, which is still an active competitor to this thing. And the third thing we did was we followed process patent and not product patent, which really got our thing. So there were many things did which the West always criticized us for and said it's not fair. I think, you know, as countries go through certain criteria, we develop a certain capability. And I think we have used that capability very rightly and very widely. You know, the kind of drugs we had in 50s and 60s and the kind of drugs we have, the kind of market share we have of the global drug industry, the kind of wealth creation we are doing for the country is humongous. And that's why I said, should we therefore have focused only on new drug discovery? Maybe not. We were commercially smarter. We took the low-hanging fruit. Well, bless us.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So I just want to add 2 points here from a medical perspective. So I think the generic drugs are exactly similar to the main component, except they have 3 things. I think size, color, and shape of the drug can be different. But otherwise, in terms of efficacy and bioequivalence, which is how much medicine is released particular time, it is exactly the same. And getting an Indian context into the generic medicines, if you see in April 2017, all the doctors have been instructed by Medical Council of India that you need to write the name of the generic, not the brand name, okay? So of course there are flaws in the implementation, but that's a good move. Second is, a statistic says that about 60 million households each year in India are becoming kind of debt-borne because of high cost of healthcare, okay? So, and about 82% of Indian population is still not covered by any kind of health insurance. Of course, Ayushman Bharat implementation is starting, but 82% of Indian households are not covered by insurance. So, generics has a tremendous impact because the cost is about 1/20th of the actual brand. So, generics are good and it's a misnomer. And of course, as Professor was mentioning, that the data by investigative journalists can always not be correct. So, generics are good. That's my opinion.
See, here in India, when you talk about generics, we are already only promoting branded generics from the beginning because of the process patent that we are following. Now, there is a new situation which has come in. Say, for example, a company like Cipla or Ranbaxy or any company like that, you know, to give you a clear perspective, there is a brand called Cifran, which is ciprofloxacin, which is an antibiotic fluoroquinolone, which is sold by Ranbaxy at 9 rupees 60 paise, which is a brand, which is a well-known brand, which is, what do you say, the topmost brand in India under ciprofloxacin. The same Ranbaxy, due to its economies of scale, produce probably extra ciprofloxacin, which they are not able to sell you to somebody. They are selling the same ciprofloxacin under another brand name called Cipro Ace, which is 6 rupees. So both are from the same plant, same company, different price in the market. So that, you can say that it is a kind of exploitation of the customer because the same standards are being followed, but the different pricing is being given because there is a marketing cost to Cifran. Basically, they have to meet doctors, there are medical representatives and other people going and meeting. A lot of promotional materials have to be used. The problem that now doctor has mentioned is that now the generic way of movement of writing prescriptions is going to cause a much serious issue in India because Medical Council of India is insisting for doctors to write generics. Say for example, a doctor writes ciprofloxacin. Then who are you giving that freedom to dispense the medicine? It is a pharmacist who is going to take the full control. And now India has about 500 ciprofloxacin brands. And what is the likelihood of me getting a quality ciprofloxacin? See, you cannot emulate the West for all the things. In West, the pharmacy profession is considered to be a very serious profession where doctors get generic, there are only very few brands under that, or generics or branded generics, whatever you say, under a particular drug. And the pharmacist has a liberty to choose among one, two, or three. Here it is not the scenario. So now when the prescription goes to the pharmacy, pharmacist is going to give a drug which is giving him the maximum margin. So when a rule is set in the West, you apply the same thing in India without looking at the industry perspective. Yes, drug prices have come down drastically when compared to other countries because of the process pattern that we follow. But at the same time, more kind of controls have to be put in place. Even we know the same situation of Ranbaxy which has happened, the USFDA has had issues and the company went into big problems. So stringent measures like probably aeronautical companies, they have proper regulations, they follow up on proper basis, strict actions are taken. Even a drug, for example, which goes to market, there is no live monitoring happening. Yes, it is happening, but by the time the batch would have been sold. And it doesn't apply a ban on the entire drug, only on that batch. So how does, the quality is ensured? So there are a lot of loopholes in the system which we'll have to clear. Like you asked for generics, if you want to improve, we have to have a very stringent regulatory system in place.
Right. I think you raised a very interesting point because what happens is once the responsibility moves from doctors to the pharmacists, it's so much easier for them to say, it's not our responsibility anymore, right? So that could be another implication of this initiative. Oh, you finished? Maybe one more question? Okay. Maybe we'll have time for one more question, and I would like to address this to Ajit and Devanand. We were talking about R&D as a culture. It's a culture of innovation, and it operates only in an ecosystem. To what extent are startups contributing to this in the recent past? Because a lot of multinationals are actually setting up R&D centers in India. But I would think they are more for electronics and computer technology, maybe less for pharma and healthcare. So what is the contribution of startups to building this ecosystem? How far have we come in achieving what we want to achieve as an ecosystem in India? And what do you think should be done to improve that? I know it's a vast question, but probably you can limit it to one or two most important.
If I limit it to health, and I'll let you talk about material sciences. I'm a big fan of the startups. I think a number of things. At the same time, the institutions are also playing. So what has happened is the government has been throwing money at institutions to start incubators. And with that has come young people like him who say, hey, you know what? I may as well be one myself. We see a large number of PhDs now shifting across. By the way, we talk about all this research and innovation. Please understand there are 4 completely different players in mindset. First is the researcher. A researcher looks at something because he or she is excited about solving that. Second is an innovator who actually looks at, I can apply this here. The third is an entrepreneur who then says, how can I make, maybe this can be applied, but can I make money out of it? And the fourth is then the institution builder who then takes that thing. The truth is there is not a single human being, maybe I think Dr. Anji Reddy was one of those rare exceptions, but there is otherwise impossible to find all those 4 qualities in one. So this is yet again a confusion that we expect a researcher to be an innovator and to be an entrepreneur, and that doesn't work really. They can work and collaborate. So that's why the ecosystem starts becoming important. How do we get these people to collaborate? On top of that, what's happening is that data and data-driven capabilities are coming into this whole thing. So we are now seeing a large number of incubators. We are seeing an enormous number of young people jumping into this. The incubators are still not as properly staffed as they should be. For example, if I want to solve this problem, I don't even check whether there is white space available. I don't see whether there is freedom for me to operate, or is somebody else got a patent already. One large institution, after 2.5 years of research, they asked us to connect them to an ophthalmological institution. We took them to LV Prasad. And as soon as that ophthalmologist read it, he was horrified. He says, you can't operate in this. There are 3 patents in this. And these people didn't have it. So there are gaps. So what we are focusing now is, a first thing before you start, please look for freedom to operate. Please look whether you have the right to do. Is there a process patent? What is the kind of freedom? Etc. So that's number 1. Number 2 is that most of our research is readiness up to what I'd call as a lab. I can produce it in 5 milliliters. But unlike an IT, which I can scale up using a number of computers, producing something, especially a biological product, in 5 milliliters and producing it in 1,000 liters is a completely different ballgame. So that's yet another weakness in this thing. Then the regulatory approval process is so long, so difficult, and so expensive. So how do we find new business models for that? We found one with Bharat Biotech, which is a separate story, and we'll talk about that. So there are many challenges, but if I were to focus on, is the seed, are the seeds being put and have they started sprouting? A very strong yes. A very, very strong yes. We still have a lot of problem. I think on the ecosystem development in health, we are at 2 to 3 out of 10. Long way to go.
Same thing, yeah, but practical examples after that. So incubations are good because they're creating a space for us, but it's not a general for medtech to material, it is varies. So computer as a scaling up, right? It is okay, one computer, two, you have to multiple. But in these areas, the material and this another area, the industrialization, incubations are, they have their own. Second thing, if large institutes, for example, T-Hub in IIIT. So there is some constraint with us. For example, I have to procure on material. I want to send into that incubation center. I need to go through number of gate passes. It may be very silly things, but while timeline, as I mentioned earlier, so it is huge, but we don't have that space. Sometimes another nearby company has different problem statement. My problem statement is different. So generalized rules may not work for industries. So that is one thing. And second thing, while developing, though we are not expecting only space and lights and ACs and all as a company. Company means we need an ecosystem coming under, but very little bit of technical side support also. Beyond that agreements, we need that one. It's not, for example, yeah, engineering thing. Then equity comes into the picture. As a startup, equity is another way of money for us. For example, as a senior expert required, we are unable to pay the money as it is, but we are offering some equity. But equity lines changes, the incubation wants to play into that. For example, the grant model also, so DST anything, if they give grant, they don't want to be that shareholding pattern and all, finance. That's why the technology commercial. As a researcher, as an entrepreneur, it is a different. So technology developer, researcher, they have their own. If I have one mg of particular material, if it is quality and world-class good, then his job is over. As an entrepreneur, these are all the factors.
So you will also probably give 3 out of 10.
Yeah.
Just one last point, which is, in my view, I don't know whether it's sad, good, bad, but it's factual. You mentioned about MNC setting up R&D. a lot of really top MNCs are actually active with ecosystem players like us, T-Hub, etc., to look for startups and to support them and perhaps take equity in them. Sadly, the Indian industry is by and large absent in that. So the Indian industry still thinks that, forget all the startup. The MNCs are extremely active. And these are really top MNCs. So in a way, it's good that the startups get better funding, better quality of support, etc. But where is the Indian industry in this whole thing?
They're seeing that as a tool for a quicker go-to-market and also in terms of cost of
The MNC,
cost of labor.
5-10 years ago, MNCs used to say, if it's not done here, it's not worth it.
Right.
Now MNCs are almost saying, if it is done outside, it's much better.
Right.
It's a great mindset change.
So any, like a question from the audience? There you are, please.
Hello, sir. Especially, I want to thank Ajit, sir. Sir, I know you from T-Hub, where my friend used to work at the nearest desk to you, and we have spoke about a research project at Made in Hyderabad event. But after that, I found the major problem to scale these research-based startups is that investment is the major problem because it won't give the returns so easily and so quickly like every other startup could do. And it won't go into the market right from the next day we get the investment or right from the day we started. So is there any solution that the government is planning to provide, like, making the policies that the T-Hub is having widely available for these startups, kind of?
Yeah. So this is a challenge. This is a problem. And I think we have been talking, both T-Hub and we at Rich have been talking for some time now, that we should create, so there is funding available till a proof of concept. And there is funding available at near commercialization. The gap between the two, so from technology readiness level of 3, 4 up to 7, 8, that's where there is a big gap. Correct? We therefore said, let us set up a fund to address just that gap. I'll be very honest with you. The governments, both at the center and the state, are actually willing. But what they're saying is, this is really not our job, We'll give you the core of about 20%. You get 80% from the industry. Tough. That's the reality. So the way I look at it is, we have not been able to convince. I actually have a dream, now that you raised this thing. I think we should all, if somebody were to tell me that, look, give 5% of your net worth, 5%, that's all, for 10 years. And we will return that in real terms. That means 4 to 5%. And we create a vast pool which we use for, so the real return I get my money back, but the real return I get is that socially important startups get a boost up and India becomes an economy. I've spoken to at least 3 potential funders. They say, please create this fund, I'll support it. Again, I think people think I'm mad, which I am probably. But we need a low-cost fund to take, and there are some real, by the way, I also think there is a great business model for anybody who wants to get people who are good at taking from 3 to 7, create a small company of them, and take what I call as the BIRAC graveyard. Startups funded by BIRAC, outstanding startups, but they have died because of lack of ability to take. Buy them out cheap, take them to 7 or 8, flog it, I think there is money to be made. I'm too old to do it.
Any more questions?
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Asif Ahmed. As we know that air pollution is the major issue nowadays. Government isn't taking any initiatives in the field of research. They're not utilizing the solar energy or renewable energy in the automobiles to lessen this pollution and all. So what is the role of the private sector, what the private sector and automobile sector is doing in this field? This is my question.
You know, the government is actually taking us to BS6 now, so.
It is a negligible
No,
initiative that.
it's not negligible. And look, you know, if you do it too fast, what's happening in the industry? It's the industry which is complaining, right? The two-wheeler, take Delhi pollution, right? If you ban two-wheelers more than 10 years old, you'll show a significant reduction, right? But these are political decisions. They dare not. Because you can't call yourself Aam Aadmi and then, you know, hit the Aam Aadmi in the belly where it matters. These are political, you know, we think, you know, we write off governments, saying governments don't do. Governments are not fool. In fact, I found governments have the most sensible people who really understand the realities on the ground. It's we who don't. So I think we have all, unless the industry comes up to a level where the industry can supply good technology, electric vehicles. I think all of you in IIT, I challenge you to prove to me that an electric vehicle is less polluting in totality. It is just that the pollution is shifted to where the electricity is produced rather than where it's consumed. Right?
We can use solar energy as a
okay, let's talk of solar. How the hell are we going to dispose of all those solar panels? We are just shifting the problem from today to day after tomorrow. I don't think we have looked at a systemic solution to any of the problems. You know, we do knee-jerk time and this thing. I think, by the way, if all of you are told that please use bicycles, how many of you are going to do it? Very few. You know, you will ultimately say we are too far from the city. If I have to go to the city to eat, I need this, that, the other. I'll order from Swiggy, who anyway uses a two-wheeler. So I think pollution, I think the government, by the way, there is a lot of research work happening in research institutions. But you know, there is a balance, continuous balance between economic growth and some of these issues. And the government, in my opinion, wrongly, is focusing on development rather than green technologies today are available in pharma sector. By the way, this state government is encouraging pharma sector to move to the new pharma city and setting up common effluent treatment, setting up material. So there are things happening. It's not that. I actually think the consumer is the worst culprit, followed by industry. And the government is the least of those culprits.
Just to add to what you've just said, like solar or, you know, using those kind of panels to create, an ecosystem where the pollution can be brought down. You know, healthcare now, but you know what the challenge that we face in terms of waste. It was considered to be the biomedical waste, which was the challenge which any healthcare organization which was, historically has been facing. Now, not only healthcare, any organization for that matter is going to be the e-waste, which is a big challenge. You know, the technology has helped us a lot in terms of gadgets, you know, computers, all these things. But then disposing that is become a big challenge. You know, there is no option. You have to just, you know, there are certain vendors, we hope that, okay, offloading to the vendors will, okay, you know, help me in disposing that. But then we don't know what they are doing with that. Some kind of recycling may be happening, but then we are going to face a bigger challenge with these kind of things. Solar panel, if you use the batteries, are there, again there is going to be problem with all those things. So we have to have some kind of system where, as he said, you know, via media has to be somewhere looked at.
So another question is, as we know, since a few decades, the human lifespan is decreasing. Average human lifespan is decreasing.
Here, sorry to intervene in front of eminent personalities. After maybe 10 to 12 years, as per my knowledge, you will have a choice to die. You have a choice to die. You can choose when you want to die. There we are going. So maybe some wrong. So ये wrong number है. इससे call ना करें.
It's okay, sir. Thank you.
What he said is the absolute thing. You know, the next biggest challenge the country is going to face is to, handle the geriatric population. So geriatrics is going to emerge as a new, it has already started as a subject in many medical colleges. Geriatric care, the people who are above 60, 70, how to deal with them, their health issues. That is coming up as a new emerging, speciality altogether. India, it has gone higher actually. Our mortality rates everywhere we have improved thanks to the public system. That is something which our public system can be really proud of. Infant mortality rate has come down. The maternal mortality rate has come down. Our aging has gone higher. So this is something which the public has a vital role to play in that. So it is going to be biggest challenge. You are saying the just the reverse actually. We are surprised anyway. Yeah.
Your tax is going to look after my health, so poor you.
So after that lifespan, any other question you had? Yeah, please. Because there we stuck you.
Actually, I was asking, like, according to the studies and all, previously the people were having the age of 100, 150 and all. Nowadays, they're dying at the age of 60, 70 and all. So the lifespan has decreased, according to me, as per I have gone through articles.
Please state your question.
The thing is that the research that is going on in the pharmaceutical industries and all, in the medicine, is it really affecting the lifespan or?
That he answered very beautifully.
No, I'll tell you just an example. There was a Coca-Cola ad. You would have seen probably. It was kind of honest kind of commercial which they brought and said that we are responsible for the the diabetes or the metabolic condition of the entire United States. Coca-Cola is responsible. Don't use our products. This was the commercial. Even after that, we are drinking Coca-Cola. So who's to be blamed? You can't blame the pharma companies for that. We know that, many things are bad for us. In a packet of cigarette, they have written, it is injurious for our health. We still smoke, we still drink, we still use all junk food. And then we blame that, cancer is, the incidence of cancer is high or many such things, But then the basic issue is that, our lifestyles have changed. We have changed our lifestyle, which is not usually, the pattern that our ancestors used to follow. That's why now there was a book called, most of you would have read, Ikigai, which mentioned about, the Japanese way of living, where this particular place, many people have more than 100 years they live more than 100 years. So the only secret was that the way of living was different. They don't bother about anything, they don't eat any bad things, most of the time raw fruits, vegetables, and lead a very happy life. So that gives you that. We know about all this, but we don't follow that. That is the whole reason.
Any more questions?
I think you have added already.
Yes.
Just that I think the quality of life is definitely affected, but not the lifespan. Yes. And
So good afternoon to all the panelists and the moderator. Myself Desai Sneh from IIIT Hyderabad. So I have two questions. First one is a general one. So during discussion I came across two terms, that is process patent and product patent. So I would like to know more about both these terms. And second question is, Ajit sir, in your closing statement you said that Indian industry is a bit reluctant, or they're not showing much interest into investing into startups. So as a startup community, as a young entrepreneur, what should we do so that we can catch the eyeballs of this Indian industry? Thank you.
Okay, so the earlier patent regime in India was the process patent. So you could produce exactly the same product using a different process. That is what allowed India to come out with these generics. Now India has become a part of the global listing, so we follow the same patent regime as everybody else. So there is no longer, you can even now, if you, in many of the other, for example, in many of, if you're using AI, ML or anything, many times your actually is the unique way in which you use it, and some of those things can still be patented. in the way in which you produce graphene in a different ways, you will be able to get anything that is a unique knowledge which you can show is not commonly thing, you can get that. Fortunately, there are individuals and funds which are slowly getting into it. I personally believe that it must be really very difficult to get funding, because only the best of the best which genuinely deserve to get funding should get funding. Right now, except in life sciences and agriculture, there is no shortage of funding for the right product. Half the times it is our inability to convince the VC. In the digital space, there is undoubtedly no shortage of funding. But just think of the world, if all of you start coming out with new then by definition you will die, because 2 years later somebody else new will come and that new will get funding and will throw you out. Doesn't work that way, right? So very, very few will really get the kind of funding, and those very, very few will be extremely good. We started the TIE ISP Connect in 2004. And I tell you, the quality of startups in 2004 was seriously pathetic. When I see the quality at TIE ISB Connect or at T-Hub or at IIIT, I think today we have startups which are comparable to the best in a lot of places. So there is an enormous improvement, and that will keep. But unfortunately, therefore, the kind of startup that could get funding 10 years ago and the kind of startup that now gets funding is going to be very different. So it's going to be tougher for you. But if you're in the digital space, there is enough funding available. So don't worry about the pharma sector. By the way, some of them are also investing through their own family offices, which is a different. So they give money to somebody and that somebody invests. But as companies, they are not investing.
Since we are running short of time, we will make this the last question. Ms. Asha, would you like to summarize? Okay, can you take one more question? Okay, we can take one more question.
Good evening, sir. Sir, I have a question that why not decentralization of industrialization is not taking place in India? I mean, not in a very high percentage.
Can you state the question clearly again?
Decentralization of industrialization is not happening in India.
You need to make the question clear. Do you
No,
mean
I understood. I think I understood what's happening. Money follows money, talent follows talent, space follows. So any decentralization has traditionally been a challenge. Why did Bangalore become such a big success, and why has it taken Hyderabad another 15-20 years to reach there? Isn't it? So I think people go where the industry is, people go. So that's what, when we talk of ecosystems, we are not able to create global ecosystems. We are able to create at the most corridors. So there is a Bangalore, Mysore, Chennai corridor. There is an NCR region corridor. We think that the greater Hyderabad will become, or maybe Hyderabad, Bangalore will become, and Chennai will become another corridor. So by definition, look at the IITs. The IITs which are in urban cities close to industries attract better students, end up doing better results, have better placements. That's the nature of the beast. Decentralization is a challenge, and governments keep trying to do that. But at least the older models have not worked because economy of scale, economy of talent, etc., work. As we get into 3D printing, as we get into rural, now we are beginning to see rural e-commerce vehicles. Kaladri, I think, is one. which only caters to tier 3 and tier 4 towns and takes only local produce and produces. So people are slowly beginning to take. Once we get into local, so what's going to happen is, instead of a pharma company producing 10 lakh medicines in one plant in one place, each one will be able to do 3D printing of the kind of strength that, so today all of us get 500 mg. But he's a lot younger and fitter, I'm a lot older and this thing, but we both get 500 mg. He perhaps needs 300, I need 600, but that doesn't the way it works. Tomorrow that will. As we get into personalized medicines, as we get into more detailed things, there will be a fair amount of decentralization. But I don't know when.
Just to end on a positive note, don't worry, the private sector has slowly started gearing up. About 5 years back, the private sector investment, if you were considering at 25%, it has reached now 42% as per these latest statistics. So the private sector has really started involving. For a company like Aster, which is into healthcare, we also have started an innovation research hub in Bangalore. We are really looking at collaborating with startups, universities, and such. I was also discussing with Professor about it. So a lot of such companies will come forward in days to come. We are also looking at artificial intelligence. The way healthcare has to be changed. Basically, now we are, even though we use the word healthcare, now we are doing sick care. It's not healthcare actually. When you get sick only, you come to a hospital. So we want to take from sick care to healthcare. So the home care that doctor mentioned, the artificial intelligence coming with more wearables, devices, cognitive psychological things, internet of medical things, a lot of things are emerging, a lot of opportunities are coming, so don't worry. I've seen a lot of hands being raised, and feeling that now is a bad time to come out to the industry with, creative ideas. This is the time, don't worry. There will be there, but you'll have to, as he sir said, you have to just choose the right product and right industry. That's what I feel.
Okay, so this will be the last question. I would request Ms. Asha to summarize.
The insights have been invaluable, I must say, and the interaction has been very impressive. I think it tells me that you have all enjoyed the session as much as we all did. If there's one message that I can zero in from this, I could be wrong because the number of insights that we got was immense. But there's one message that I think is a takeaway, which is what we need is a global ecosystem of players. Although research is happening at a silo level in various areas, to take R&D in India to the next level, we need a larger ecosystem of players who work together towards a shared vision. So we need the interfacing of ecosystem players like the institutions, the researchers, the academic institutions, the investors, the incubators, everybody to come together to work towards a common goal. Thank you so much to all of you for sparing your valuable time.
Just add one more thing, sorry.
Please.
See, just one more point. She has said everything in a very... but as a country, India, are we celebrating these people? Researchers, the academicians, the people who are coming out with such things, we are just celebrating movie stars and sport personality with due respect to them. But we don't know the 10 researchers, you ask them, the top 10 researchers who are featured among the 6,500 top cited researchers, you can't name even one person. So let us also celebrate such people.
Sure,
Yeah.
especially if India has to become a 5 trillion economy by 2024, I think that's the key. Yes. Thank you very much.
I thank all the panelists and the moderators. Now I would request the moderators to present the mementos to our panelists. Maruti, please assist. Can we have a round of applause, please? Mr. Ajit Rangnekar, could you present? Dr. Venkat Ramana Gedela. And Mr. Srinivas. Oh, I'm sorry, it was the wrong order. It's okay. And Mr. Oh, I'm sorry.